Questions from any one of you on the topics that which we discussed earlier? No questions? All good? Okay. Right, so we'll go and start another topic, which is within the same virtual networking, which is virtual machine, virtual networks. I'm sorry, virtual networks.
Vijay, we are unable to see your screen.
I'm able to see. Now it should be right.
Yeah. I have a question, Vijay. Actually, yesterday you have logged into one VM, right? We have created one VM and logged into VM.
Correct, correct. Yes.
Yeah. Could you please log into that VM once again?
Yeah, we'll create one because I think I have deleted
Uh,
all of them. I don't keep them. We'll create one today. And
uh,
what is the question?
okay. Actually, when we logged in, we are able to see the different IP on that VM, like some 40 dot something.
Okay, see, there will be one public IP address and there
Okay,
will be
so
one
that's a
private
public
IP
IP only,
address.
right? Okay,
One,
okay,
yeah,
fine.
one public will be there, one private will be there. I'll explain that. Okay.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So we discussed yesterday, and of course in our earlier class also, day before yesterday, whatever we discussed on virtual networks, right? And we discussed subnets. And yesterday we had seen how do you create a virtual network? How do you create subnets as a part of that? That part also we had covered yesterday. And an extension to that, what we had also seen is we had seen how does this communication between the VNets will happen. So theoretically we understood that okay, so two VNets they are segmented and they are isolated, which means that they don't talk to each other. And we had also seen practically yesterday where we had seen that situation of resources in one VM not talking to the resources of the other resources of one VNet not talking to the resources of other VNet. That's a default behavior, right? So how do I bridge these? And let us say you have a project requirement and you may want to enable communication between the VNets. Now, if this is your Azure environment, and let us say this Azure environment has got multiple virtual networks. Let us name them one as, okay, so let us name one as maybe prod, dev, and then maybe some UAT kind of stuff. Okay, so let us name. So this is my prod virtual network. This is my development virtual network. And let us say this is my UAT, user acceptance test. These are all, let us say, they are located in the regions. Let us say this is located in central US. And this is also located in central US. And for some reason, this one is in central India. Okay, so this is in central India. Assumes. So my UAT users are in central India. So I created those resources. Let us say in central. Now, when you have an environment like this, and the behavior here is you don't have the communication between these two, right? These two there is no communication. These two there is no communication, and of course, central India and central US will also. I mean, prod and UAT will also not have any communication. So the prod VNet, let us say it has got an IP address. We assign, let us say, an IP address 10.0.0.0/16. And let us say for this, we assigned an IP address 10.0.0/16. 1.0.0/16, and let us say we assigned here an IP address 10.2.0.0/16. These are all the IP address of individual VNet. Your network team has gave you this. And each VNet has got subnets. Each VNet has got subnets. Let us say production has got 2 subnets, development has got 2 subnets, and so has your UAT. And you deployed some VMs in each one of these. You deployed VMs in each one of these. So now your boss comes and asks that, okay, so I need communication between my prod and dev, right? He says that I need communication between prod and dev VNets, and you know that, right? So you don't come, you will not be able to access the resources across the VNet, but he comes to you and says that, okay, so you need to enable communication. And so as he also asks, boss, I also need communication between these two as well. So how do we do that, right? How do we do that? So Azure provides you a solution called as Vnet peering. Azure provides you a solution called as Azure Vnet peering. So Vnet peering will create a peering two-way, in the sense from prod to dev and dev to prod. So one-way peering will not work. It should always be two-way for the Vnet to work, Vnet peering to work. So I need to go and bridge by creating a Vnet peering between central US and prod of central US and dev of central US. And then I have to peer dev of central US with UAT of central India. So what is that you are doing is you are bridging two VNets in the same region. And of course, you are bridging two VNets in different regions as well. So you are attaining this by using this solution called as Vnet peering. Using a solution called as Vnet peering. Now, if you combine, if you enable communication between the VNets in the same region, you call it as normal Vnet peering. If you enable communication between the resources in the same region, then you call it as just Vnet peering. If you enable communication between the VNets across different regions, example, central US and central India, these are all different regions, right? So if you enable communication between VNets across different geographical regions, then you call it as global VNet peering. You call it as global VNet peering. So you have a local VNet peering and you got global VNet peering. Right? You got local VNet peering and you got global VNet peering. Right? So okay. Okay, so if it is in the same region, what do we call it as? We call it as just VNet peering. Same region. Same region, what do you call it as? VNets. And if it is different regions, then you call it as global VNet peering. Call it as global VNet. This is across regions. So in this solution, you need to configure one local peering or general peering, and the other one is you need to configure global VNet peering. So that is a requirement here. Okay. So what we do is we'll quickly go and create a prod Vnet, dev Vnet, and UAT Vnet. 3 Vnets we'll create. We'll create one subnet in one of these Vnets, and then we'll deploy VMs in them, one VM. Then we'll see how does they communicate initially, and then we enable a Vnet peering, and then we will, what do you call it as, check after the enablement of Vnet peering. Okay, right. So let us first go and create Vnet peerings first. So how do I do that? Let us first create virtual networks first. Okay, so how do I do that? Go to virtual networks. There is already one virtual network. That's okay. So we can leave that as is. I'll add one virtual network. I'll put that, let us say, in pay as you go. I'll put that in a resource group called as my resource group. And what is the name? First Vnet, I'll name this as prod. And then this prod Vnet should be in which location? Central US. Right? This should be in which location? Central US. Say next, IP addresses. So I want to give an IP address range of 10.0.0.0/16. That's what it picks. That's good there, right? And then I'll create one subnet here. I'll name this as subnet 1, maybe something like this. Okay, subnet 1. I'll name this as subnet 1. Right. So what I did here is within this Vnet, I'm creating one subnet with the name called as subnet 1. I'm creating one subnet with the name called as subnet 1. And that has got an IP address of 10.0.0.0/24. 10.0.0/24. Right, let us go and create this virtual network. Now the next step is we'll go and create one more virtual network with the name called as development. So let that get deployed. I will go to the virtual networks and then add virtual network. And again, I'll put that in pay as you go, my resource group. I'll name it as what? Dev. Development virtual. And this should sit in central US. IP address. So I want to give 10.1.0.0/16. Same is listed. And I'll name this as subnet. This has got a subnet, the name subnet 2. So this has got a subnet, the name subnet 2. And the IP address of this subnet 2 is 10.1.0.0/20. Right? So only one subnet they are creating. I'll go and create a Vnet, which also creates the subnet that which you just mentioned. So you created prod Vnet, you created development Vnet, and both of them are sitting in which location? Central US. Okay. So now you need to go and create one more virtual network with the name called as UAT, and that sits in which region? It sits in Central India. Okay, so let us go back to virtual networks, add virtual network, and I'll put in the same resource group, and I'll name this as what? UAT. And this UAT network should sit in which location, which region? Central India. Preview and okay. So I think I have to show you the IP address. Go back, go back, go back. Right? So it picks an IP address 10.2.0.0/16. That's what we want. And we'll create a subnet in this, which we call it as subnet 3. Subnet 3. And this will take an IP address 10.2.0.0/20. Right? Create this Vnet as well. So you are creating this Vnet in which location? Central US. So far you are done the creation of 3 VNets, 3 subnets with IP address ranges specified here. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll go and use these virtual networks, and we'll go and use these subnets and deploy some resources in this particular VNets and subnets. So let us say on this prod VNet, I want to deploy a server named as PVM1. And this development, I want to deploy a server with the name DVM1. And in this UAT, I want to deploy a server UVM1. Okay, so we'll go and deploy 3 servers in each one of these VNets. In the subnet 1 of prod, subnet 2 of dev, subnet 3 of UAT. Okay, so let us do that. Let me go to virtual machines, add virtual machine, put it in a resource group, select the same subscription. Okay, select the same subscription. Now what should be the name of this VM? PVM1. PVM1. Which location it should be? It should be in Central US. Central US. And you may want to deploy a Windows 2012 server. Leave the size and everything default. And then I'll give username, password. Disks, leave it default, go to the networking. Right now, what VNet it has to sit? It has to sit in prod. Right? In the drop down box, it is showing me only 2 VNets, prod and dev. How about third one? Why it is not visible? Because the VM what you are creating is in Central US. That's the reason the Central US virtual networks are visible. Because UAT is in Central India and your VM is getting deployed in Central US, that's the reason you are not able to see this UAT, what do you call it as VNet. Okay, so I want to place this VM in production, and in that production I have only one subnet, which is subnet 1. I'll go and select it. And does this VM requires a public IP address? Yes, I need a public IP address. I'll leave as new public IP address name. Otherwise, if you don't need, then you select none. Okay, right? So I'll leave everything default and I'll go and create a VM. Right, this is my first VM which is getting created in production VNet in the subnet called as subnet 1. Similarly, I have to deploy my second VM, which is DVM1 in development VNet. Let me go back to the virtual machines, add new virtual machine, same subscription pay as you go, same resource group, my resource group, and I'll name this as DVM1, which is my first VM in the development environment. And I want to deploy this VM in which location? Central US. Right? Go ahead and select the location as Central US. Select the location as Central US. And of course, image. What image you want to go with? Windows 2012. And what size? I'll pick some size. That's okay. Whatever the size it is. Right? And then username, password. Disks leave default networking. So now this should sit in which VNet? It should sit in development VNet. So select development. And which subnet? It should sit in subnet 2. Select subnet 2 here. Does this need a public IP address? Yes, it does. Go and create your second VM. Right? Now you have these two VMs. Now we need to go and deploy the third VM that should sit in UAT environment, and that UAT environment is in which region? It is in Central India. Right? Go to the virtual machines, add one more virtual machine here. Same subscription, same resource group. Now this time the VM name is UVM1, and this should sit in which location? In which region? Central India. And what operating system? Let us say Windows 20. Username, password. Right? Username, password. Then go to disks, go to networking, and here you see only one VNet. Why only one VNet? Because in Central India, I got only one VNet. Because in Central India, I got only one VNet. That's the reason it is showing one virtual network. So now, as I said, these VNets has got boundary of region. So that's the reason you see only one VNet here. And this VNet called UAT has got how many subnets? Only one subnet. So that's the reason only one subnet is shown here. Right? And does this need public IP address? Yes, because we have to access over the internet from our desktop. Right? Go ahead and create. So something wrong here. Okay. Right? Create the third. So now what you did is you created different VNets in different regions, and then VMs in each one of them. Right? That's what we attained. Right? Let me go back to my virtual machines. Now there are two VMs which are running. The third VM, it is still in the process of deployment. Now first what we do is we'll go and work on this one. So first requirement is you need to bridge these two. This VNet and this VNet should be bridged. They should be paired. That's a requirement. They should be communicating with each other. So, but before that, let us quickly get into PVM1 and DVM1. Right? We already have them. Let me log into production VM, connect. Log into this. Then we'll also log into the other VM, which is development VM. Connect using the public IP address. Connect using public IP address. Now you are into these two machines. Let us quickly look at what is the default behavior. We had anyway seen that yesterday, but I just want to show you whether they are communicating with each other initially. Then we will see how does it will be after enabling the peering between them. Right. So what is the IP address of this? And IP address this. Now let me ping 10.1.0.4 from here. It will not ping. Let me ping 10.0.0.4 from here. That will also not ping. So these two machines are not communicating with each other. There is no network connectivity between them. Why? Because they are sitting in different VNets. My boss requirement is different. Now he want to enable communication between these two. The solution you have is VNet peering. Right? Now how do I go and create a VNet peering? Now in order to enable VNet peering, you need to go to the virtual network, and within the virtual network you need to pick one of these two, what do you call it as, VNets. So let me go with prod first. Let me select the prod VNet, and within this virtual network called prod, you see this option called as peering below the DNS options yesterday what we were discussing. Peering. Your requirement is to add a peering, right? Your requirement is to add a peering. So let me go and add a peering. Okay, so like any resource, it will also ask you what is the name of this peering. So this production VNet on which you are on is peering to a remote network. Now what is the remote network here? Dev. So production VNet, name of the peering from prod to remote VNet. Right, so I'll name something like this, prod to dev. Prod to dev. Okay, so you're saying prod, but to which network it has to talk? It has to talk to dev. So the moment you select here, then this is changed now. You see, name of the peering from prod to dev. So earlier it was remote location. Now you said that, okay, I want to peer with dev. So it understands that, okay, so this peering is from prod to dev VNet. So that's the reason it picks the dev here. Okay, so your first VNet connection is from prod to dev. So you're already on prod. Now you're selecting destination as dev. Now there is some information here which is very important to understand. Okay, so for peering to work, a peering link must be created from prod to dev and dev to prod. So one-way peering will not work. So it should be always two-way peering. One-way peering will not work. So you don't have, if you say that, okay, I'll create only one way, then I'll leave the other way. No, it will not. In fact, you will not be able to create a peering like that. It won't allow you to complete the wizard by just creating one-way peering. So initially what you did, you created a peering from prod to dev, right? So you select, you're already on prod. Now you selected your destination as dev, right? Now what is that it is asking? Name of the peering from dev to prod. The other way, right? It is from prod to dev and dev to prod. I'll name this as dev to prod. Some name. So you are creating two-way peering using a single wizard. right? And then you have this option allow virtual network, allow virtual network access from prod to dev, and allow virtual network access from dev to prod. So these should be enabled for two-way peering. Even if you disable one of them, the peering will not work two-way. So that is tested, that's how it is. And that's the reason they clearly say here that the peering should be two-way. Otherwise, it will not work. Okay, so don't think that okay, if I disable here then it is only one way. So I did test that, and there were a few discussions which had happened with a couple of folks, and that is validated that it will be only one way. It cannot be one way, it should always be two ways. Okay, now forward traffic through prod to dev and dev to prod, it is traffic forwarding which will come when we talk about gateways and other stuff, but right now it is not needed. Okay, so gateway transit is also when you enable VPN gateway kind of stuff, you can use that. But for a normal peering, you have to create this. For a peering, you have to create this. Right? Say okay. Now what it does is it creates a peering between prod to dev and dev to prod. Okay, so let us wait for that. So now you can see there are two peerings created. You are on prod Vnet. Within the prod Vnet, if you go to the peering option, then you see there is a peering with the name called as prod to dev. Status is connected, and to what Vnet it is connecting from prod to is connecting to dev. And then you have here option to delete and gateway transit related information. Similarly, if you go to dev, you go to the same peering option, then you will see dev to prod. Vnet peering created, status is connected, and dev's peer is what? Prod. Right? So now you went ahead and created a Vnet peering. Now what happens? You see the change. You see the change. Now, because you did put a peering here, right? Prod to dev, and another peering dev to prod, you are able to enable the communication between them. Right? That's how your Vnet peering will work. Now, what if they are in different geographical location? Will it change? The way I create will change? No, it is same. The only thing is they are spanned across geographies. The difference is within the same region across the different regions. Now let us go and do our second test. Okay, so our second test is, our second requirement is, my boss is also saying UAT should be communicating with dev, but they are in different geographical locations. So I'm already on dev server. Let me minimize this. I'm already on dev server. Let me go and log into my UAT box. That is UVM1. Right, so this is your UAT VM, and let me so let me go to the command prompt of this, and let me select the dev. Okay, so from dev and UAT communication, we'll quickly see this. Okay, so right? So this is my dev, and this is my UAT, right? This is 2.4, 2.0.4. This is 1.0.4. Ping 10.1.0.4. So this is this here, right? So ping. So it will not. Right? Similarly, ping 10.2.0.4. This will also not. For the reason that they are in two different VNets, and of course they are spanned across different geographical locations. Right? I'll put a continuous ping so that we'll see. Now I need to go and bridge these two. I need to peer these, right? Central dev in central US with UAT in central. Same solution. Go to your virtual networks. Go to one of the VNet. You can go to either dev or you can go to UAT. You can get into one of them. So I'll go to dev and I'll use this peering option, and then I'll create a peering here. Now this dev is talking to a remote network which is called as UAT. So I'll name meaningful name dev to UAT. Some meaningful name for identification. Now you're already on dev. What is its peer network? Its peer network is UAT. Right? Its peer network is UAT. Though it is in a different geographical location, when it comes to the peering, all the VNets across different geographical locations will be visible. So you can select. Similarly, I want the other way as well, UAT to dev. Then go ahead and create. Right? UAT to dev. It creates a
So
VNet.
Vijay, if you don't mind, please, or should I wait? Just one question, curiosity. All this peering is happening within the same subscription, and what if you have a multiple subscription, and if you want to allow access from one subscription to another subscription?
Yes. Hold that question. We'll see. We'll see that. Yeah. Okay. So let this get created. You can enable. We'll see that practically. Okay. Right. So you have this dev to UAT, and if you go to UAT, then UAT to dev. Okay. Now see this. They started communicating. So VNet peering is not within the region, but it can be across the regions. Configuration is same. Only thing is they are at different geographical location. That is the reason they are called as global VNet peering. Right? It's called as global VNet peering. Now, what did we do? We created dev to UAT, and then UAT to dev. Okay, that's how you can enable the communication. Now, the next question. Prod is talking to dev. Dev is talking to UAT. Right? Prod is talking to dev. And of course, dev is talking to UAT. The other way also, right? Now, will UAT talk to prod? Is this connection transitive? Is this connection transitive? Is this connection transitive? The answer is no. VNet peering.
Sorry, Vijay, what was the question? Is this connection transitive?
In the sense, If A is talking to B, B is talking to C, will A talk to C or not? You're getting that, right? If there is a communication between A and B, if there is a communication between B and C, then will A and C talk to each other or not? So that's the question here, right? So same here, Prod is talking to Dev. Dev is talking to UAT. Now the question is whether UAT will be able to communicate with Prod or not. So you will not be able to. And why? Because it is not a transitive communication. Right? Let me quickly show you that as well. So this is your production VM. This is your UAT VM. Right? So I'll ping my prod VM from UAT 10.0.0.4. It will not. Similarly, this VM will not be able to communicate with 10.2. Right? It will. So it is not transitive. So that's the reason when you design, when you kind of go and have VNets, then you should have a purpose and you need to make sure that you have right designing, and don't get into that mode of enabling communication. Even if you are, then it's okay, but how many such interconnections you create? It will kind of mesh, right? So the more VNets you have, the more what do you call it as peerings you create, then it's very tough for you to go and understand how things are interconnected. But that's how it is. So create more subnets within the VNet rather creating more VNets. Wherever there is a possibility, you can go and create VNet. Where is there is a requirement, you can go and create VNet. But it's better to have minimum number of VNets in the organization. And you can divide your network into subnets, right? And within this, there is no restriction. They can talk to each other. And if you want to put restrictions between them also, you can do it. There's a way. Tomorrow we'll discuss it. But you need to have very less VNets. Okay. Now, so coming back to your question. Now, these VNets, they're all sitting in one subscription called as pay as you go. So subscription is nothing but categorizing or dividing your environment based on some cost center or whatsoever. One Azure account can have multiple subscriptions. Could be based on department, project, or whatsoever. Now these VNets what you created belong to a subscription with the name pay as you go. What if there is a VNet which is in, let us say, some other XYZ subnet, XYZ subscription? Will they be able to talk to these? No, they will not. VNets across the subscriptions will also not talk to each other. There will not be communication between VNets across the subscriptions. Then how do you enable that communication? We'll see that practically now. Okay, so let me go ahead and create another virtual network, but I'm creating this time in what do you call it as a subscription called as personal. I'll put this in a resource group. I'll name this as training. Okay, so training. Let us say that training. So there is a training Vnet, and let us say this has got an IP address range of 192.168.0.0/16. And then I'll create a subnet, internal training, and I'll put some IP address here, same IP address range 192.168.0.0. Maybe I want to use entire range. So now what you are doing is you are creating a Vnet called as training in a subscription called as personal. And let us say the people whoever are in these Vnets, let us say UAT, prod or dev, they should have access to, let us say, this training, right? They should have access to. So this is, okay, so how do I put this? Okay, so I would have drawn that little bigger. Okay, so let us, right? So let us say this Azure cloud, you got another Vnet, and this has got a name called as training, and this has got an IP address range of 192.168.0.0/60, and then this has got a subnet with the name internal training. Internal training. Right, and then this IP address range is also 192.168.0.0/60, entire space here. Now this sits in which location? Where is the training? I think it is in central US, right? Central US. Now the other difference here is this training is sitting in a subscription called as personal. Whereas all these are sitting in a subscription called as pay as you go. Right? Pay as you. Now your requirement is maybe you may want to create, you may want to enable access, let us say UAT and training. Right? You may want to have an access between UAT and training. So they are in, okay, so maybe may not be in UAT and training, maybe dev and training. Right? We'll see both. Okay, central dev and training. Because dev it is because both are all in central US, and UAT because one is in central. And so your requirement, let us say, to enable communication between UAT and training, and to enable communication between dev and training. Let us say that's the requirement. Right? So your training should be talking to UAT, and your training should be talking to dev, and dev should be talking to training, and then UAT should be talking to training. Kind of. Okay? Right. So let me go now, and let me create a VM first. Okay. So in training, let me name this as training VM. Okay. So put it in a resource group, put it as training VM1. and this again in central US, and let that be again a Windows machine, and then some size here, username, password. And then when it comes to networking, and this should sit in train. Now, will it show the other VNets? Okay, it is in central India itself, right? It is in central US itself. But in central US, you got other two VNets, prod and dev. Why are they not visible here? They are not visible for the simple reason this is in personal subscription. And whereas these two prod and dev are in pay-as-you-go subscription. So in personal subscription, you got only one VNet, which is training. That is the reason you can see only one VNet here, which is called as training. Right? So your VNets has also got a boundary of what you call it as subscription. Okay. So let me create this VM quickly. Okay, so this VM is getting created. Let's wait for that. So it is still deployment in progress. Right, so your TVM is created, but status is still creating. Let's wait for that to change the status. It's taking a little time. Let me see if I can connect. No, not yet. So, so once you have this, then we'll try to see if we can, we can see to create a peering between these, and I'll show you that as well. Okay, so this one is up now. So let me connect to this training VM. Right, this is your training VM. Now, our first requirement is training talking to UAT, right? Training talking to UAT. Right, let me pick the UAT VM as well, UVM1, right? What happened? Okay, I'll check that if I create communication. But what is the IP address of this? It is 2.0.4 and training. Training. What is the IP address? Okay, so it is 192.168.0.4. Now ping 192.168.0.4, a continuous ping, and ping 10.2.0.4 continuously. This is expected behavior, right? So now I want a communication between training VNet and then what do you call it as UAT VNet, and they are not only in different geographical location, but they are in different subscriptions as well, right? So let me go back to my portal, get into VNets, pick your maybe training, go to peering, add peering, then you say, what do you call it as, from training to UAT, right? And then what is your destination? Now, what you see here is, it will show you, give me a minute. Right, so what it does is it show you the subscriptions here, right? So personal, MSDN, and all those things, right? So now what you should be selecting is your peering with what? I mean, with pay as you go, right? So go and select a subscription pay as you go. Then it will list all the VNets in that particular subscription. Now my requirement is to enable communication between that UAT and training. You're getting that, right? So you have to pick the subscription, then you have to pick the network, virtual networks. Then the other way, right? UAT to training. Then let me increase the font. So UAT to create it. Now what it does is it creates a peering not only between two geographies but across two subscriptions. Across two subscriptions. Right, you can see the status is updating. You should see some changes here.
Interesting. From training, you're able to get data. There you go.
Right, so the way you enable across the subscription is also peering. There's other solution called as VPN gateway, which we'll be discussing in our VPN gateway session. but you can bridge or enable communication across the subscriptions, VNets across the subscriptions by using Vnet peering. It can be globally, it can be within the same region. Okay, so does that clarify your question, Murugesh?
It does, but my question is, okay, what is the best practice? Like you said, VPN gateway is one solution and VNet peering across subscription is one solution. What is the best practice or the industry standard? How do they do it in an industry?
So I think you have to refer this. Okay, so I'll give you this because you already know what VPN gateway is. Right, so refer this article. So what is the, when do I pick which one, right? So which is the best one? So I did put that in our chat. So I'll discuss this in our discussion anyway, but in the interest of others, I don't want to confuse them. So we'll take that whenever we discuss VPN gateway, but you can refer to that, right? So advantages, disadvantages, when I should go with peering, when I should go with gateway solution, it's very much listed there. And there's a table which gives you detailed differences and advantages and disadvantages. Based on that, you can, choose one of them. Okay. Right. So, any questions on this one, whatever we discussed? If so, please ask. You guys got what I explained, right? Or any clarification that is needed? Okay, silence means I'm thinking that okay, so we are good. What is that we covered so far, right? So the cloud computing basics, and then regions and geographies, subscriptions, and these things we'll discuss. And here we are, right? So we understood VMs, virtual machine settings, custom images, and of course in this we did also discuss something called as, which I didn't include here. Let me quickly put that as well. So here we discussed shared image gallery, which is nothing but replicating images across, right? And then adding additional interface cards. And then yesterday we were discussing about VNets and subnets. So today we discussed Vnet peering, right? So in our next class, another interesting and important topic, which is called as network security group. That's what we are going to discuss. Okay, so network security group is our next topic. Okay, so if you got any questions, then please ask. But practice, all these things requires practice, then only you will attain the expertise. Okay guys, if no questions, then I think I'm done for today. We'll catch up tomorrow at the same time. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.